Good evening. Wow, it's a nice packed audience tonight. Good evening. I'm Brian Dorries. I'm the Artistic Director of Theater of War Productions. I'm here with 3 actors. That was really good, but we're going to try it one more time. I just want to, so for everyone to know, we're recording a radio show tonight. So you're active participants in this radio recording. And what we're experimenting with, this is the 3rd installment. It'll be on the air on the 26th and the 29th of April on WNYC at 2 p.m. on the 26th and 8 p.m. on the 29th. Is we want to give listeners a sense for the room. And I don't want us to feel like, you know, SNL or the Letterman show, but we need 12 seconds of applause. So even if you hate this experience, we still have you applauding at the very, no, we just want to give people a sense for the warmth of the room. So I'm going to just ask you in just a second, and I'll count it down, if that's okay, to give us 12 seconds of uproarious applause. But maybe we can do that just in honor of the actors. I'll just say we have Oscar Isaac.
You have to mean it. I mean, yeah. Don't fake.
We have Oscar Isaac, Kathryn Erbe, and Bill Camp. Let's give them a huge round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It means so much to them and to me. I'm Brian Dorries, as I mentioned before. This is the 3rd installment of our long-form journalism series, and we're so honored you came out tonight to be part of it, both those of us here at the Greene Space and those on Zoom tuning in from all over the country and the world who are participating in the conversation. I have a couple things I want to say in the top, and then I'm actually going to read some narration because we're also experimenting with the idea of having some of the narration from the show be in the room. So I hope you'll bear with me as we experiment in multiple directions tonight. But thanks for coming for the 3rd installment of our series. As you probably already know, our series presents acclaimed actors reading serious and character-driven pieces of long-form journalism to frame important and powerful conversations about issues that impact us all. And before getting started and reading the narration in just a second, I want to thank a few people. I want to thank Max Blau and Barbara Weber. I want to thank ProPublica, who's here in large numbers tonight. ProPublica, one of the last bastions of independent journalism in our country. We're so delighted to be here with you. And most critically, WNYC for partnering with us on this series. Lastly, I want to thank the Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund, who's underwritten the entire 6 installments. Thank you so much to them for their support. Okay, so again, this is an experiment. It may not make it on the air, but just bear with me. Thanks, Bill, for letting me borrow your table here. I'm going to try this out. So here we go. I'm Brian Dorries, Artistic Director of Theater of War Productions. I've been making theater for most of my life, and what I'm interested in is what theater can make you feel. How a live performance can touch you so deeply that for a moment you're open to other possibilities, to other perspectives, to complexity, to contradiction. At Theater of War Productions, we address issues that are hard to talk about. And then we pass the mic to people in the audience to share their perspectives and stories and their opinions. Like all of you here in this room and the thousands of people out there all over the country and the world who've tuned in on Zoom, you all, our audience, are as important to us. You all, our audience, are as important to us as the actors performing on stage. And we're eager to hear your reactions to what you hear. Today, we're going to explore the thorny world of health insurance and what happens when it fails us. I'm sure most of us here have had a run-in with our insurers, a denied claim, trouble accessing a provider, problems with pre-authorizations, and it's a horrible feeling. Sometimes it results in something horrible happening. We're going to hear a piece that was published recently in ProPublica. Heads up, This is hard listening. The article is called, "I Don't Want to Die." Needing mental health care, he got trapped in his insurer's ghost network. It was written by Max Blau. The actors who will be reading the piece are Oscar Isaac, Kathryn Erbe, and Bill Camp. Bill's going to start us off.
Ravi Cortino bought a health insurance plan thinking it would deliver on its promise of access to mental health providers. But even after 21 phone calls and multiple hospitalizations, no one could find him a therapist.
Early one morning in February 2023, before the sun rose over Phoenix, Ravi Coutinho went on a walk and for a brief moment thought about hurling his body in front of a moving bus. He had been feeling increasingly alone and depressed, anxious and unlovable, no longer sure if he was built for this world.
Several hours later, Ravi swiped open his iPhone and dialed the toll-free number on the back of his Better insurance card. After navigating the automated voice system, he was routed to a friendly, fast-talking customer service rep with a slight foreign accent. His name was Giovanni.
How can I help you today?
Hi, I am trying to find a psychiatric care provider.
So you are looking for a primary care provider?
No.
Ravi replied, seeming confused, but Ravi tried to clearly repeat himself.
No, psychiatric.
Psychiatric. All right, so sure, I can definitely help you with that. By the way, it is your first time calling in regards to this concern?
Ravi paused. It was actually the 6th attempt to get anyone at Better to give him or his mother the name of a therapist who accepted his insurance plan and could see him.
Despite repeatedly searching the Better portal and calling customer service, all they had turned up so far, he told Giovanni, were the names of 2 psychologists. One no longer took his insurance. The other inexplicably tested patients for Alzheimer's disease and dementia and didn't practice therapy at all.
I'm a little concerned about all this.
This had not been part of the plan Ravi had hatched a few months earlier to save his own life. Diagnosed with depression and anxiety and living in the heart of Austin, Texas's boisterous 6th Street bar district, the 36-year-old former college golfer had become reliant on a dangerous form of self-medication.
His heavy drinking had cost him his marriage and was on the verge of destroying his liver and his livelihood. His therapist back in Texas had helped him understand how his mental illnesses were contributing to his addiction and vice versa. She had coached him through attempts to get sober.
And he wanted to save his business, which sold dream vacations to golfers eager to play the world's legendary courses. He wanted to fall in love again. He even have a kid. And he couldn't do that when he was drinking 1/5 of a gallon of liquor, the equivalent of nearly 17 shots on any given day.
When all else had failed, he and his therapist had discussed a radical move, relocating to the city where he'd spent his final years of high school. Phoenix symbolized a happier and healthier phase. They agreed that for the idea to work, he needed to find a new therapist there as quickly as possible and line up care in advance.
Ravi felt relieved when he signed up for an insurance plan right before the move. Better wasn't as well known as Blue Cross Blue Shield or United Healthcare, but it was the most popular option on healthcare.gov, the federal health insurance marketplace covering more than 2 million people across the country. For $379 a month, his plan appeared to have a robust network of providers.
And frustrating phone calls like this one began to confirm for Ravi what countless customers and even Arizona regulators had already discovered. Appearances could be deceiving.
After misunderstanding Ravi's request for a therapist, Giovanni pulled up an internal directory and told Ravi that he had found someone who could help him.
It was a psychiatrist who specialized in treating the elderly. This was strange, considering Giovanni had asked Ravi to verify that he was born in 1986.
I mean, like, geriatric psychiatry it's not. I mean, I wouldn't qualify for that.
Ravi responded.
Annoyed, but polite, Ravi asked Giovanni to email the provider list on the rep's computer. He figured that having the list, which he was legally entitled to, would speed up the process of finding help.
But Giovanni said that he couldn't email the list. The company that ran Ambetter would have to mail it.
What do you mean mail? Like physically mail it?
Ravi let out a deep, despondent sigh and asked, how long would that take?
7 to 10 business days to process, Giovanni responded, in addition to whatever time it would take for the list to be delivered. Ravi couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity.
I'm sorry, it's nothing personal.
He told Giovanni.
But that's not going to work. So I'm just going to have to figure it out.
This baffling inability to find help had tainted Ravi's fresh start. In the weeks before the call with Giovanni, Ravi had scrolled through Ambetter's website, examining the portal of providers through his thick-rimmed glasses. He called one after the next, hoping to make an appointment as quickly as possible.
Of course, it was unreasonable to expect every therapist in Ambetter's network to be able to accept him, especially in a state with an alarming shortage of them. But he couldn't even find a primary care doctor who could see him within 6 weeks to refill his dwindling supply of antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds. Days before he was supposed to move to Phoenix, he texted friends about his difficulties in finding care.
Therapists have been 0-4. Called 10 places and nothing. The insurance portal doesn't know shit.
Ravi didn't know it, but he, like millions of Americans, was trapped in a ghost network. As some of those people have discovered, the providers listed in an insurer's network have either retired or died. Many other providers have stopped accepting insurance, often because the companies made it excessively difficult for them to do so. Some just aren't taking new patients. Insurers are often slow to remove them from directories, and if they do so at all, it all adds up to a bait and switch by insurance companies that leads customers to believe there are more options for care than actually exist.
Ambetter's parent company, Centene, has been accused numerous times of presiding over ghost networks. One of the 25 largest companies in America, Centene brings in more revenue than Disney, FedEx, and PepsiCo. But it is less known because its hundreds of subsidiaries use different names. In addition to ensuring the largest number of marketplace customers, it's the biggest player in Medicaid managed care and a giant in Medicare Advantage, insurance for seniors that's offered by private companies instead of the federal government.
ProPublica reached out to Centene and the subsidiary that oversaw Ravi's plan more than 24 times and sent them both a detailed list of questions. None of their media representatives responded.
In 2022, Illinois' insurance director fined another subsidiary more than $1 million for mental health-related violations, including providing customers with an outdated, inaccurate provider directory. The subsidiary admitted in writing that they are not following Illinois' statute for updating the directory, according to a report from the state's insurance department.
In a federal lawsuit filed in Illinois that same year, Ambetter customers alleged that Centene companies intentionally and knowingly misrepresented the number of in-network providers by publishing inaccurate directories. Centene lawyers wrote in a court filing that the company denies that it made any misrepresentations to customers.
The case is ongoing.
And in 2021, San Diego city attorney sued several Centene subsidiaries for publishing and advertising provider information they know to be false and misleading. Over a quarter of those subsidiaries' in-network psychiatrists were unable to see new patients. the complaint said. The city is appealing after a judge sided with Centene on technical grounds.
Even the subsidiary responsible for Ravi's plan had gotten in trouble. Regulators with the Arizona Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions found in 2021 that HealthNet of Arizona had failed to maintain accurate provider directories. The regulators did not fine HealthNet of Arizona, which promised to address that violation. When ProPublica asked if the company had made those fixes, the department said in a statement that such information was considered confidential.
These were exactly the type of failures that Ravi's mother, Barbara Weber, confronted as the head of an advocacy group that lobbied for greater health care access in New Mexico. From her Albuquerque apartment more than 300 miles away from her son's new 12th floor studio, she listened to Ravi vent about how hard it was to find a therapist in Phoenix.
Ravi was Barbara's only child, and they had always been close. In the 7 years since Ravi's dad died, they'd grown even closer. They talked on the phone nearly every day. Barbara was used to supporting Ravi from afar, ordering him healthy delivery dinners, reminding him to drink enough water, and urging him to call crisis hotlines amid panic attacks. But when Ravi crashed at her apartment while waiting to move to Phoenix, she saw more of his struggles up close. And at one point, she called 911 when she feared for his life.
Despite her desire and ability to help him, Ravi didn't want to stay with his mom for any longer than necessary. He didn't want to feel like a teenager again.
Barbara understood her son's desire for independence. And when he first encountered insurance barriers, she drew from her expertise and coached him through ways to get past them. But by the middle of February, a few days after Ravi settled into his new place, there was no good news about his mental health care. She felt the need to step in.
So she called Better to try to get better information than what Ravi was looking at online. But Kem Padilla, a customer service rep who seemed to be working at a call center overseas, couldn't help her find that information. She then asked Padilla to send referrals to therapists.
When Padilla followed up, he only sent phone numbers for mental health institutes, including one that exclusively served patients with autism.
I wish that everything will work together for you,
Padilla wrote in an email to Barbara and Ravi on what happened to be Valentine's Day.
And don't forget that you are loved.
Loneliness is one of the strongest forces for triggering a relapse in someone addicted to alcohol. And Ravi's early days in Phoenix provided a dangerous dose.
His old friends were often busy with work and family. He hadn't found his way to a new Alcoholics Anonymous group yet. He struggled to find matches on dating apps.
Phoenix Tinder is a wasteland,
he told one friend. His only consistent companion was Finn, a half-Great Pyrenees with a thick coat of fluffy white hair, whom he took on long walks around the city.
His unconditional love brings me so much joy,
he told his mom.
Alone in his apartment with Finn, vodka within reach, Ravi felt guilty about calling his loved ones for help. Even though his mom and his friends would pick up the phone at just about any hour, Ravi hated the idea of bothering them.
But he couldn't resist after he hung up with Giovanni, the customer service rep. That afternoon, February 22nd, he fired off a frustrated text message to his mom.
How is it this hard?
Ravi seethed.
Barbara's next move was to reach out to a member of her nonprofit board who happened to work for a Centene company. The board member, a person who works for the insurer to help the board member helped pull strings in late February to get Ravi a care manager, a person who works for the insurer to help patients navigate access to providers. But not even his new care manager, Brianna Smith, a licensed professional counselor based in Arizona, could connect him to a therapist.
She spent 16 minutes calling in-network providers to check if they could see him. 4 couldn't, 1 could. Instead of calling more, she sent along a single therapy referral. When Ravi called that office, the staff had to verify if they accepted Better, but Ravi never heard back.
She did get him a referral for a psychiatric nurse practitioner who could refill his meds. He first saw him 1 month into his move. Robbie hoped that the office might be able to refer him to a therapist, but none of the 3 providers it ultimately passed along took Embeddor. One of them had stopped taking insurance a decade ago. Another had only seen patients willing to pay cash.
Without therapy, Ravi's descent took on a momentum of its own. One day he drank himself to sleep and woke up with a pillow full of blood from his nose. On another, he white-knuckled a version of do-it-yourself detox that caused violent vomiting.
A close friend from high school, David Stanfield, was watching it all unfold. Ravi had always made David feel like they could pick up where they'd last left things, but this new, withdrawn person who would break into a sweat on a crisp night in the 60s was a far cry from the guy he once knew.
Ravi was beginning to remind David of his brother-in-law, who had died of a drug overdose a few years earlier. So when Ravi sent a series of distressing texts indicating that he had relapsed, David and another friend staged an intervention and took Ravi to the hospital.
But Ravi resisted rehab that didn't come with therapy. He wondered what good another detox would do if it didn't help him combat the root causes of his addiction. He was also worried that it would get in the way of his ability to work. Ravi was still booking some golf vacations through his business and figured he would have to surrender his phone during a rehab stay.
Instead, Ravi sated his withdrawals by feeding his body more alcohol, giving way to a March whirlwind of blackouts, massive hangovers, and despondent texts to friends. When Ravi showed up to a baseball game looking pale and disheveled, a friend's young son turned to his dad and asked,
"Is Ravi okay?"
By early April, almost 2 months had passed since Barbara's first call to Embeddor, alerting them that Ravi was having trouble finding a therapist. Embeddor was obligated by state law to provide one outside of its network if Ravi couldn't find one in a
timely manner.
Which in Arizona meant within 60 days.
Within that span, its own records showed he'd wound up in the emergency room seeking treatment for alcohol withdrawal and called a crisis line after he had thought about ending his life. Yet despite 21 calls with Ravi and Barbara, adding up to 5 hours and 14 minutes, the insurer's staff had not lined up a single therapy appointment.
Smith called Ravi 4 times over 2 weeks, right as his mental health crisis worsened. When he didn't respond, she closed his case. On April 7th, Smith did not respond to multiple requests for comment or to questions about what information she tried to share with Ravi on these calls.
As Ravi's attempts to find a therapist slowed down, his descent accelerated.
There was the episode at a Phoenix Suns game when paramedics had to treat him for severe dehydration after he downed a bottle of vodka.
There was the time he left the dog food container open and Finn got extremely sick from eating a week's worth of food.
As Ravi crossed into his 4th month in Phoenix, he sat alone in his parked Kia Forte, surrounded by nothing but the lonely quiet, and screamed at the top of his lungs.
Barbara didn't expect to spend Mother's Day with Ravi, but after he told his uncle that he was having visions again of jumping in front of a speeding bus, she boarded a last-minute flight to Phoenix and settled into his couch where she could watch him as he slept.
On the morning of May 13th, she was roused by his flailing limbs. He was having a seizure. Paramedics rushed Ravi to the hospital, the 2nd time in the past month, and 4th since the year began. Doctors gave him benzodiazepines, Valium, and Librium to treat the seizures and the anxiety caused by his alcohol withdrawal.
Mom,
Ravi told Barbara,
I don't want to die.
One kind of treatment suggested by hospital staff, an intensive outpatient program, seemed the best fit. It would allow Ravi access to his phone for his business purposes. But neither Ravi nor Barbara could get a list of in-network programs from Embeddor, nor could they find them in the portal.
As Ravi called every program he could locate in Metro Phoenix and failed to find a single one that took his insurance, Barbara decided to pester her board member again. This board member did not respond to multiple requests for comment.
A few days later, someone with Centene provided the names of 2 in-network programs out of the dozens in Arizona. Only one offered the individual therapy Ravi was looking for.
That Friday, May 19th, Barbara rode with Ravi to Scottsdale, where the intake staff at Pinnacle Peak Recovery drug tested him. He tested positive for the benzodiazepines that the hospital staff had administered following his seizure. Treatment programs sometimes restrict patients who test positive for these drugs because of the liability, experts told ProPublica. Pinnacle Peak Recovery staff urged Ravi to come back the following week. Barbara flew home, hopeful that Ravi would be admitted. Pinnacle Peak Recovery did not respond to multiple requests for comment.
On Monday morning, Ravi wrote the date, May 22nd, on a sheet of paper. He tore it out of a notebook and he held it up to the side of his face and he took a selfie with it. It was a way of marking time as well as a milestone, the first day of his newfound, hopefully permanent sobriety.
When he returned to Pinnacle Peak, however, he tested positive again. The second rejection hurt more than the first. 3 days later, Ravi went back a third time. The drugs were still in his system.
I don't know what else to do.
He told Barbara over the phone.
I am screwed.
The answer of what else could be done was, unbeknownst to Ravi, buried in the fine print of his own insurance policy. Ambetter's contract promised to find an out-of-network treatment program and make it available to Ravi so long as Ambetter's own employees decided that it was in his
best interest.
Even though Barbara hadn't read the fine print either, she had a sense that Ambetter could do more to help Ravi, so she pulled up the number of the last Centene employee she'd spoken with.
In a text message, Barbara expressed concern that the window to get Ravi help was closing. She was certain that without more medical support ahead of admission to a treatment program, Ravi was bound to relapse. If that happened, Barbara pleaded, there was a good chance that he would have another seizure. She warned that he might even die.
Barbara awaited word on what to do next. She got no response.
The following morning, May 27th, she drafted a message to Ravi. She described her visceral memory of his recent seizure, waking to the sound of his screams, pounding on his chest after his heartbeat briefly stopped, calling 911, uncertain if he would survive.
Those few minutes are seared into my soul and will go with me to the end of my days, she wrote.
Barbara also wrote that she wanted nothing more than for Ravi to be around for the rest of her years. She promised to support him no matter what. If he kept going, he could find peace with Finn and find someone to love. But he had to keep going. Not for her, not for Finn, not for his friends, not for anyone else.
I love you.
She wrote.
But you must love yourself.
She hit send. Ravi didn't reply right away, which was unusual.
An hour passed, then another. As the afternoon gave way to evening, Barbara called 3 times, unable to reach him. She tried to reach Phoenix's 911 dispatch, but couldn't get through.
Not knowing what else to do, Barbara called David, whom Ravi had asked to be his local emergency contact.
David had grown deeply frustrated with Ravi for not getting the care he needed, and he was worried for his friend. He agreed to call 911.
A police dispatcher sent an officer to knock on Ravi's door. The officer could hear Finn barking from the other side. When no one answered, the officer called David, letting him know that the police couldn't enter the apartment without the building's security guard, who wasn't around right then.
Unsatisfied, David and his fiancée, Allie Noer, drove over to Ravi's. A security guard who had just gotten back from his rounds was reluctant to let them into the apartment at first, but after David and Allie explained the urgency, the guard relented. They headed up to the 12th floor and turned the corner toward Ravi's apartment.
When the guard unlocked the door, Finn squeezed past and darted out. As Ali grabbed Finn, David peered inside, calling out his friend's name. 4 empty vodka bottles were strewn across the apartment. The Murphy bed was folded up against the wall. No one seemed to be there.
David glanced toward the window that frames the Phoenix skyline and felt a sense of relief. His friend might still be alive.
When he turned to leave, he looked again at the bed. He realized it was slightly ajar. As he leaned closer to see why the bed hadn't fully locked into place, David spotted something jutting out from the gap between the mattress and the wall. A lifeless foot.
Thank you very much. That ends our dramatic presentation for this evening. Thank you so much for your attention. I want to thank our actors, Bill Camp, Kathryn Erbe, Oscar Isaac, for their reading of Max Blau's report, article in ProPublica, I Don't Want to Die. I want to thank all of you for training your attention, both on Zoom and those of you in the room, on what was a very intense article, and acknowledge it was very hard to hear. But part of the hope of our work is that we create the conditions to face these things together, not in isolation, but as a community. So in spirit of that, because we have limited time and I want to hear from as many people as possible in the room, I'm just going to plant my feet and ask the first question and hope some people will join me in dialogue right away so we can move through a series of themes. Now that you've heard these actors going for broke, reading this text with minimal rehearsal, what spoke to you in the performance tonight? What resonated with you? What touched you? What was true? There's a hand right here, Ryan. There's a mic coming to you right there. Yeah.
Hi, I actually have bipolar disorder myself, and this resonates to me because I've been through it several times, and the way I was able to resolve it, unfortunately, was to play my disability card, which means, and I do, in fact, have gone through 2 suicide attempts. So I told the insurance company that I have this history. I am currently severely suicidally depressed again, and I need you to find me a psychiatrist, like now, because I'm on the edge. And that was the way I was able to get the help. I had to actually, and they were fearful because they thought I would sue, and God forbid I did, kill myself and was successful, they would be in big trouble.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing your experience, but the part that resonated with you being the extremity of that one has to go to of self-advocacy to sort of force an insurer to do the right thing. Thank you so much. Yeah, right here.
I'm a mental health provider myself, and I think what really stands out is the people that we work with daily who don't have the mothers, they don't have the care, they don't have the people to call and check in, and I think that's what we hear almost every single day. And it's when they'll come to us and we're supposed to be the answers, and we're supposed to be able to navigate the insurance companies and navigate, and we have all this training and we have the privilege around that, and even we are just like, our hands are tied. Like, what, I think there's so many days where it's just like, what are we supposed to do? Because it's a system that's broken. Even when somebody does everything right, the providers often don't even have the answers. And so, that's hard when someone doesn't even have that. They don't have that support, let alone a loving mother or family.
Thank you so much. Yeah, with all the resources in the world, some people aren't able to access the care they need. But what about the people who have no resources at all and no family or advocacy supporting them or around them? I really appreciate. There's a hand here, and I'll come right over here. Yeah.
How you doing? The thing that really touched me was, the struggle of mental health, and then trying to access, For 20 years as a 911 provider, I'm a paramedic for the fire department. I've been going to people's homes who don't have access, who I have found people in Murphy beds. That's not an exaggeration. I have found people who have been at wit's end, and I always tried to separate and say, oh, that's them, not us. But since 2020, I've had 12 paramedics commit suicide for the fire department. And I've had a total of 39, including myself, who have had suicidal ideations. And you think that because we work for the city, we have access and we have medical insurance, but it's not adequate. I've had numerous medics, including some that have committed suicide, relate to the families that they have been turned away. They don't have an ability to tap into the medical insurance we have because there's a waiting list. There's 60 days, 90 days, like what was mentioned in the reading. So much so that the medics have had to start our own funding, and we have to provide our own mental health services. So we started something called the EMS FDNY Help Fund, where we all chip in money from our own salaries. And out of that, we pay for our own mental health services because that's 24 hours. And those people get back to us. I can't begin to tell you the heartbreak, and I could hear it in Oscar's voice a little, where he talks about how the person is, we've all been that person. We've all been Ravi. We've all sat there at our wit's end. And I don't know what it's going to take for us to say we want something different, but it's articles like this that keep reminding us that we're choosing this at the moment. Out of all the chaos that is in this country, we're also choosing to have the status quo when it comes to mental health and the insurance programs that we have to partake in. And not only are the people that are partaking in it affected, but the people who are coming in those 911 calls are suffering as well. So the whole system is broken. So I don't know what it's going to take to fix it, but just know that we're all in this together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. When even the frontline workers who are responding to emergency calls can't get the help that they need, what kind of society are we living in? There's a hand right here.
Thank you. My name is Ashley Miles. I'm a mental health advocate and I'm a member of Fountain House. I've been living with a severe mental illness since 2018, and for the last 5 years I had to navigate it on my own. I was in and out of hospitals, and it wasn't until 2023, when I was in and out of hospitals 3 times, I was finally set up with the proper supports, getting connected to the clubhouse and having a crisis response team that actually made sure that I got connected with care coordination. But even then, it still wasn't enough because that care coordination agency paid me no mind. When my phone number was disconnected and I was in the hospital, no one tried to find me. It was only the people at the clubhouse who kept an eye out and was concerned about my well-being. And I have to say that I'm very scared right now because I do live on Medicaid, and with the potential cuts to it, it scares me every day that I might be without my medication and I'm just going to be lost.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for bringing that into the room, for sharing your story, for bringing us into the stakes of the present moment for you and for so many others. There's a lot of lived experience in the room. There's a hand over here. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Hearing that story makes me very angry. And it also reminds me of the failure that caused me to step at the edge of the 34th Street platform for the #1 train. In 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, I am part of an advisory council to the Commissioner for Mental Health in New York State. And I challenged the commissioner to examine racism within mental health care in New York State. It's 5 years later. We still have not got that report. It was not done. They've made all sorts of excuses. They've tried all sorts of things to avoid providing an evaluation of how racism shows up in mental health care in New York State, from the policies, the procedures, the laws, as well as the funding that is provided to agencies. The governor apportioned $5 billion about a year or 2 years ago to agencies, to the OMH, to be distributed. We asked the governor, the commissioner, could you give us a list of the organizations who you gave the money to, so we can see if their board of directors and their management reflect the communities that they serve. We still haven't got that list. And the $5 million is almost done. And what we know for a fact is that in New York State, mental health is a performance. It is run particularly by white-owned and operated industry. That black and people of color are just numbers for the grants. So what was described in this story is not particular to Phoenix. It is extraordinarily applicable. And now they're talking about the law to advance involuntary committals. That's a problem, because it does not take into consideration the rights of black and people of color who are often seen as disposable. When I stood at the end of the platform, I had no one to turn to.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to talk about a lot of things tonight, health insurance, health care. I appreciate that you brought into the room racism in healthcare and in the system itself and in our government. These are all obstacles, and it can feel so overwhelming to just acknowledge. And I'm hoping that we'll find some places of light and hope in the room as well. Part of, for me, of the light is just being here to hear your story and know that you survived and you're with us to tell that story and to advocate. So I appreciate that very much. But I'm going to drill down a little deeper and ask a second question that goes into challenging territory, specifically about the article tonight. And you can, of course, answer the question. You can say what resonated with you. You can make up your own question. But I want to keep us moving and try to get some more responses in the room. And the question is simply this, because the article was about health insurance and these policies. Have there been times when health insurance has failed you or has failed someone you love? And are you willing to talk about it? There's a hand right here.
Oh, sorry.
Is that a hand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whoa. Okay. I moved up here in 2020-ish, and it took I'm on disability. It took forever for Social Security to get my information over here so that I could get on New York Medicaid. So finally got that done, and then in 2021, I wound up living in my car and drinking because and it got really bad, and I wound up in the ER because I couldn't find anybody to, and so they prescribed me something, and they were able to send me to somebody, but that place didn't have any appointments for 6 months. And actually, I got lucky. My dad wound up doing Medicare Advantage on the side over the holidays for extra money. And he said, "Do you have that?" And I said, "No." And so he went in and he researched them all for me. And he said, "Okay, these are your best options. This is what I have. Do you want to do one of these?" And so after that, I was able to get in to see an actual doctor. And now my PCP helps me with regulating the meds. And anyway, yeah, it was just really difficult to try to get from one state to another and then make the transition. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Make the insurance transition.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. In so many ways it resonates with the article, and I appreciate that. And that your father played a sort of advocacy role in helping you navigate the system. And that led to some kind of a positive outcome, although it's a struggle. And so I really appreciate all of those. Does anyone else want to speak? Yeah, is that maybe someone over here, and then we'll go over here, Dominic. Yeah. Ryan, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I kind of want to speak to how this article resonated with me,
Sure.
particularly because of the personal experiences I've had with healthcare failing me. I feel like sort of with my generation growing up, we've seen the conversations around mental health get better and more open, and a lot of the stigma has lifted to the point where I can talk really openly with a lot of my friends about my mental health. But some of the reason why this was really refreshing is because sometimes the conversations I hear don't actually reflect the reality of how difficult it is to get mental health care in this country. You know, it's all just reach out and ask for help, just ask for help. One time my mom, frustrated with how difficult it was to get me to a therapist and how many times I had been hospitalized, said, "Why do you let it get to that point where you need a hospital, where you are going to kill yourself tomorrow?" And I said, "Mommy, what choice do I have? I can't find anybody to see me." And I live with ADHD, which makes it particularly difficult to complete tasks, to make phone calls, to make all of these emails and reach out to people. And when I finally do get somewhere and the therapist or the provider isn't the right fit, or to speak on discrimination in healthcare, a lot of times I end up seeing male providers that kind of treat me like I'm crazy or tell me I might have borderline personality disorder, when I know that's not true, when I know that's a statement based on misogyny. It makes it so incredibly difficult to tell people just get help or reach out or do all these things or be like, you need to just want it. You need to want to get help. Because I know from experience and from hearing all the experiences of people here tonight and from hearing this article that it's just not that simple. And it's been really refreshing to hear this conversation happen and reflect my experience.
Thank you. I'm really glad you found it refreshing. That's the hope, that we can create a space where people can hear their own story and feel seen or heard, or maybe see something of their own experience reflected in someone else's experience. We've neglected the side of the room over here, and then we've neglected this side of the room over here. I promise I see you. But let's go over here in the back. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Thanks everybody for sharing your stories. It resonated with me as well. I work for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, so don't look at me as the villain. But just to show that from our perspective, there's only so much we could do at the administrative level. And what I've learned from the experiences here in like grassroots organizations, community-based organizations, the answers are always in the community. Like sometimes even, I don't want to get in political with it, like with FEMA, when things happen, a lot of people look for the government, but the government sometimes they so antiquated or far removed that they don't really have the answers. Because as we know, Tyson, there's a saying, those closest to the problems, closest to the solution. And sometimes they're not in touch. So I notice the help I've received and a lot of people I know working in the community is always from us. The answers are always in the room. And like just having it's community, right? So you can't spell community without unity. Just having galvanized around that person that needs help, even if they can't reach out to somebody, they are organizations. And we're not talking about governmental organizations, just organizations that are willing to help because they were in that predicament. And those are the people best suited to help because they were there as well.
Thank you so much. And speaking of those in the room, I want to widen the room for a second and just acknowledge that there are people all over the planet who've been raising their hands and tuning in. So we're going to bring some of them into the room, and I promise you, if your hand up, not everyone will get to speak tonight, but we'll get to as many as we can. But I want to go first to Annalise. Annalise, what resonated with you, or was there a moment that healthcare failed you that you can speak to? Over to you.
I would like to say that I am part of every single aspect of this article and this problem. I worked for Cigna Healthcare for 8.5 years. I was a network manager, so I was in charge of one of those ghost networks, multiple ghost networks. And I also was a care manager, so I was in charge of taking those phone calls from desperate people, desperate customers who could not get care. And I was responsible for helping negotiate the incredibly low rock bottom rates that we at Cigna knew providers could not afford to take. So we intentionally did that so that nobody would actually take our customers.
Wow, thank you, Annalise. I really appreciate that you had the
Oh, I also helped with the ProPublica article. I helped with the research for their entire.
Part of tonight is just about naming things, and I feel like the article names a lot of things, but hearing you name them, Annalise, brings a whole other level of authenticity. Thanks for your courage and for acknowledging the system you were part of and the things that you were part of. And I think the more we can raise our consciousness in the room about what those are, the more we can help others who might be facing them. Lauren, you're next in the order What resonated with you, Lauren? What touched you? Was there a moment that healthcare or health insurance failed you?
Well, I'm a political activist and organizer, and I fight neoliberalism, which is the philosophy of the last 45 years that public goods and services could be provided better, cheaper, and faster by private industry than the government. And all you have to do is look at health insurance, where actually when they pay out a claim, it's called a medical loss on their balance sheet. So how can you entrust health care to somebody who makes a profit from not providing it? So it's frustrating to me. And I feel like, I was also a Bernie Sanders person, and he's been fighting for Medicare for all, even longer than I have, which is 20 years. And he always talks about how we're the only advanced industrialized country in the world that does not provide health care to its citizens as a right and not a privilege. And it's frustrating for me to see the Democratic Party support something like Obamacare, which was a right-wing program developed by the Heritage Foundation, first proposed by Republican Bob Dole, first implemented by Republican Mitt Romney. And all it did was subsidize private insurance because government made up the difference. But my other reaction is, as a mother of an adult child with special needs, who I've been his case manager now for pretty much 25 years. And as I'm listening to this story and hearing this woman who seems really capable with intellectual and maybe even financial resources, trying but failing to help her son, I had to say to myself, why didn't she look to the nonprofit world? I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I contribute to several mental health organizations that provide either very low cost or free, if necessary, mental health services. A friend of mine works for one of them, Jewish Family and Children's Services. And while I was waiting, I looked up in Phoenix to see if they had a chapter, and they do. And they say that ability to pay is not, considered. So I was just feeling like, did this mother not know about these private nonprofits where she could have gotten help for her son? I don't know if any of the reporters from ProPublica are there and can answer that question, but I was kind of curious about it.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate everything you brought into the room. We're not here to simplify, we're here to complexify the conversation, and you definitely did that by several of the things you brought, some of the perspectives you brought into the room. I'm going to let your question float, and if people want to take it on, they can. But I also want to go to people out here who've been waiting for some time. Lily, we're going to come back to you in just 1 second, so just hold on. But there's a hand over here. You've been waiting for some time.
Hi, I'm Joe Feldman. I'm a dad, and health insurance has failed our family on multiple occasions. When our first child needed care beyond what we could find at home, a residential program was indicated, and not long after our child arrived, the insurance company, with no information, decided the care was not medically necessary. And eventually they filed through their so-called independent psychiatrist a false report to document that they had decided it was not medically necessary, and they were wrong. And we eventually sued, and we won a federal lawsuit against our health insurance company, and then they paid what they should have paid in the first place. And that really was a stepping stone for a nonprofit that I started called Cover My Mental Health. And we try to help people advocate for themselves. And we also work very closely with clinicians so that clinicians can better advocate for their patients. And this is a pervasive problem across the system.
Thank you so much. Dominic, let's go over to this side over here because they've been waiting over there. Yeah, all the way in the corner, or either one. You can go there and we'll go over here too. She's been waiting for some time. Okay. But clearly nonprofits have a role to play as per what's been brought into the room. Not a single nonprofit can cover all the problems in the country, but I appreciate the advocacy, the power of advocacy, especially when it comes from such a personal place. And your story is really inspiring. Thank you for bringing it into the room. Over here, yeah.
So the term ghost network is totally new to me. I'd never heard that before. And it really resonated for me on some level, in the same way that, like, when you can label an emotion, it gives you more power. Just knowing that this thing that I've experienced multiple times actually has a name. Because, I mean, I think of myself as a resourceful, competent person. I have excellent insurance. I'm a federal employee. Well, I was until last week. So I have good insurance. But I've had this experience of, looking at the portals, going through the lists, calling, having them say that they're going to mail me something, looking through the list, and then calling all of these different providers and not being able to find care for my child. And then deciding to go out of network and paying thousands of dollars out of my own pocket, and then to the point where, I would actually every 3 months or so take a day of leave for basically it's a financial health day where I would just spend the entire day calling health insurance, calling providers, trying to connect the dots. Why haven't you received my claim? Oh, you did receive my claim, but it was missing the third page, but the third page was there when I sent it. It's just, and there's something about, this story was incredibly sad and heartbreaking. But on some level, hearing that it's not just me, right? That there's people who are hearing all of these, I think everybody in this room probably has a similar experience, that it's something that everybody is doing alone, and it can feel extremely lonely and feel like, what's wrong with me that I can't make this work for me, right? I'm paying health insurance, I'm just not doing it right on some level. But it's an experience that, obviously so many people are having. Yeah. And I don't know what the solution is. It sounds like people have ideas about that. And it's incredible.
Thank you so much. We're going to get to talk about solutions, and I appreciate you bringing that question into the room. We've had a hand up here for a long time. We're going to go here. And then I'm going to ask another question after this person speaks. Over to you.
Greetings, everyone. So my name is Christina Sparrow. I'm the founder of the New York City Mental Health Collective. I'm a person who lives with bipolar disorder. And being Black and being poor, I don't get the health insurance that I need, and many of us don't, especially if you're poor. Adequate, accessible, affordable, trauma-informed, culturally sensitive, person-centered healthcare is a necessity. This type of healthcare is a human right, and we all deserve to get this type of healthcare. The neoliberalist capitalist policies that allow health insurance companies to make profits over saving lives is criminal. And we advocate in this room, and other people should advocate, we should definitely talk to our elected officials to start making these changes because our lives matter.
Thank you, Christina. So here's the question. Here's the question, and it's going a little bit even more into an uncomfortable place. I apologize. Some people like jumping out of planes. Some people are thrill seekers. I like having really uncomfortable long silences. And about to have one right now. So we've had one person join us already, but are there other people here who have worked in the insurance industry, or might be care providers, doctors, clinicians, nurses, who provide, mental health care or other types of aid, who feel complicit in the system? And how does that sit with you? Over to you.
Something that struck me about the article and the performances, thank you, it was wonderful, was the impersonal, mechanical, inhuman nature of the system. And it takes me back to long ago when I worked in health insurance. That was my first business job. I was there through 1986 through 1997. I was working when this whole vocabulary of networks and case managers and preferred provider plans, it was born then. I watched it be born, actually. I remember I was doing group contracts. I was putting this stuff into contracts. And all of that was designed to save money, right? Costs were exploding in the late 80s. The insurance companies were starting to feel the pressure that the government was going to take over. So here's managed care. You had it in very small pockets like Kaiser Permanente, but this became the main focus. And when I no one talked about this happening, right? No one talked about ghost networks. No one talked about what we heard today. But when you think that this whole structure was designed to save money, it's natural that it would lead to this. So when I look at it, it's like, and when we talk about solutions, I feel like we have to peel this back. It's like Lauren was saying about the Obamacare. Obamacare basically stuck within that managed care system. The managed care system was designed to save money more than anything else. So I was there. I was there. It wasn't my idea, but I was there.
We won't blame you for the entire thing, but we appreciate you acknowledging the part you played and how it, many decades later, you could see the logical chain to where we are now. Anyone else who, there's a hand right in the center making it so easy for me.
I'm going to throw a damper on things and make it a little more depressing. I used to work for the Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services, and let me tell you, it is amazing how terrible the substance abuse service is that we have. And no other disease do they tell you when you don't get better to go back and try it exactly the same way. That in any other disease, they say, we didn't get it, we missed something, we have to try something, no way. So talking about insurance, I'm not sure that's going to be the great winner, or the way we're looking at things. I mean, we've got so much bias. Racism is incredible in this. I mean, I've been to I have one ex-partner who's now on the street. Sometimes you'll see him. He might be wearing socks, or he might not be making sense, or he may be rejoicing because you gave him $10. We got attacked by somebody so just confronted with somebody who didn't want $1, didn't want $2, then he wanted $10, then he went back to $5. And nobody started out to be an addict. It is not a career choice. Nobody started out to have mental health. It is problems. It's not a choice. And we make very little progress, in part because even when we get insurance, we don't give people enough to be able to get long-term care. Now, I will something positive. We all here, the four of us, are involved in different ways in Fountain House. Does anybody know what Fountain House is? All right, thank you. Fountain House is basically lifetime support. It's a family. It works on the idea of an intentional community, which means that we all are members for life, and we go there, and activities there are designed to do social practice, which means to practice social skills on a continual basis. And some people will maybe walk away from it and get past it, and some people won't. Some people will be there. This is their social life for the rest of their lives. It isn't bad. Let me tell you, it's the best clubhouse I can be. It doesn't care about what your towels, whether they have monograms on them. It doesn't care how your tennis game is or what school you went to.
It's free and voluntary.
Right, it's free and voluntary. And when you get there, you don't have an illness because everybody has an illness. Big deal. So, which, these are very important things to support. But you can't be trapped by it because it is not the answer. Every person, almost every person, I say everybody, has other treatments going on. So they're supported by residential money. They're supported by medical and other kinds of care management treatment. They're supported by give me some other things we have that people need. They need tremendous amount in order just to live and be happy. Come over sometime and see it. People are amazingly happy. I mean, you go in 80 times, people will call me by name to say hello. I'm 72 years old. I'm not like the most popular, prom queen, right? But anyway, look at the illness. Look how little we're doing. Look how little we are taking it. Examine yourself about when you see people who are mentally ill or see people on drugs as somehow, that they wanted to do it or they weren't, or they're bad because they can't get over it. Those things stink. They're rotten. They're rotten illnesses. I mean, I can't begin to tell you. They're not. We got to look at them and really just feel bad for people and try to figure out how we can do more than we have.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I love that. You really should go to Fountain House if you haven't been there. I say this as someone who's been there many times, and it's and I can't say it enough. And I'm so grateful that you all came. But I also hear, just to my question, I hear you saying that you worked in an office where there is a treatment or something that's prescribed for alcohol and substance abuse that places a kind of moral judgment upon people for whom that treatment doesn't work. And so we have both the issue of insurance and access to quality health care. We also have the issue of the treatment itself, and then the moral associations of whether you failed if the treatment didn't work for you. Somebody had a hand right here, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna come right back to you.
Hi, I'm Wendell Potter. I worked for insurance companies for 20 years. I worked for Humana and Cigna. And I'm very grateful for ProPublica, for Max, for Barbara for telling her story and Ravi's story. This is not unique. This happens day in and day out across this country. Centene is one of 7 large for-profit insurance companies. Collectively, these companies take in more than $1 trillion a year from us as taxpayers and policy holders. They can't afford to have adequate networks. They choose not to. They want to make it more difficult for us to find the care that we need, because the more barriers they erect, the more easier it is for them to meet Wall Street's profit expectations. We're just a few blocks really from Wall Street, which is where they worship. And I know this because my name was on Cigna's earnings reports for 10 years. These companies make enormous amounts of money, and they spend enormous amounts of money on stock buybacks rather than paying mental health providers what they should be paying them, and to make more people available, more practitioners available to people who are enrolled in their health plans. They also spend enormous amounts of money in Washington in lobbying expenses and campaign contributions to protect the status quo. That's how this game keeps going on and on and on. And United Health Group, which is the largest of the companies, in 2023 and 2024, spent over $18 million lobbying in Washington, lobbying both lawmakers and regulators to protect the status quo. And keep in mind that Centene and most of these companies now are getting the majority of their revenue from us as taxpayers through Medicare Advantage, the Medicaid program, Obamacare has been mentioned a few times. That's where the money is coming from. We, as taxpayers, whether we are enrolled in Centene or some other plan, we are subsidizing their profits, and the profits are going into the pockets of shareholders, big institutional investors, and not to people like Ravi who are needing the care that they need. So I would encourage people, I would love for this to be something that could be performed in Washington and in the Capitol, because lawmakers need to hear this. They hear day in and day out from lobbyists for these big companies, but there aren't nearly enough of us who are telling the stories of people who are trying to get the care that they need. So I hope that this can be something that can be staged in the Capitol.
Thank you so much. All we need is an invitation. We're there, and I appreciate, again, hearing from people who've worked in the industry, articulating the insidious and almost unimaginable logic of how these networks are structured to make profit. And hearing it from you, sir, grounds it with a certain authenticity that we wouldn't have if we were just speculating about it or reading it in an article. So I appreciate the advocacy you're doing now and also what you brought into the room. Does anyone else want to respond to this one question? Are you a provider, Nate? Okay, then I'm going to back off for 1 second. If anyone else want to respond to my question, I'm going to go to Lily, who's been waiting up here for a while. Lily, thanks for your patience. Wherever you want to drop into the conversation is totally fine with us.
Can everyone hear me okay?
We sure can.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to try and keep it together, but first, I want to thank you for putting this production of war. It was actually almost exactly 5 years ago, which, funny enough, Oscar that one for Oedipus project. It was when I was a sophomore in school and I'm not in college, and so during this time, very formative. These experiences, I want to hear about these experiences. That's just been really incredible. I just want to thank you for putting on these things. They're really incredible to watch. For me, my first thought, well, the story was, I really hope he, that was what I was hoping and holding on to this entire performance. I hope he was that care and that he lives. And so ending is absolutely.
Lily, you're coming a little bit in and out for us, but I think I heard you say you were hoping while watching the performance that Ravi would get the care that he needed. Is that correct? Because we were losing some of your words right now.
Yes, can you still hear me okay?
Maybe if you lean in a little bit, that's good. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, what I was holding on to the whole time was that I hope he lives. I hope he gets through this. And so obviously that ending is heartbreaking, and reading it is one thing, but seeing it performed is even worse as well, to see what happened at the end of that. I feel like I have a unique perspective. One, as a college student, we have mental health providers on campus that are easily available. And I know without that, if I had to go through regular insurance, I would not be here if I had to experience it that way. But also, my mom is a licensed psychologist and she has her own practice, and she day in and day out gets screwed over by insurance companies of not getting paid enough for the work that she does. Annalise was just talking about it in the chat of the wage that insurance companies pay. And so seeing it from that point of view is one thing, but hearing the actual stories from people is, again, heartbreaking. I can't put into words how that makes you feel, because again, I think we all know someone that has gone through that exact thing, whether it was friends or it was family or it was yourself. But I also want to say thank you to everybody in the audience who shared their thoughts after this. Your stories are so powerful to hear, and they're also inspiring. I also love all the New York accents. As someone from Minnesota, I love hearing them. They're so much fun. But yes, I just want to thank everybody for sharing their stories, because listening to this story is one thing, but then hearing all of your connected stories as well makes it even more impactful.
Thank you so much, Lily. I really appreciate that. Abigail, you're next. We're going to go to you, and then we're going to go back out to the audience because we have about a few minutes left. We want to get through a couple more questions. Abigail, what resonated with you?
I'm a consumer protection attorney. Is one of the few people who works a lot at the intersection of niche healthcare regulations that are ruining all of our lives. And so I think what really strikes me with everyone who I think about you is, if you need any healthcare, especially mental health, you're going to have to deal with the ghost network. You're going to have to deal with some sort of administrative nightmare. It is just the administrative disaster water that we're swimming in. And I think we do often feel like it's because we are bad at health insurance. And it's hard to see that it's actually that we are being failed by the health insurance system, that it's not a skill issue. It's that these companies are screwing us over. Because I think what makes me curious, and why I've worked on this for 6 years now at this point, is that all of these practices violate the law. We actually have regulations and laws that address almost everything that has been raised today. There are regulations that say that your directory has to be accurate, that you have to provide enough providers in the network to actually provide care to your enrollees within a reasonable amount of time. But the companies just don't follow them. And that's because these regulations and laws, they are not written to actually be enforced. And the few people who can enforce them usually choose not to. And I think that is just an enormous abdication of duty and of public service, and the idea that regulation should be protecting all of us. No, you're a large company, you should be excused from following the law exception here. And I think with ghost networks in particular, this is so basic. This is literally just getting together a directory of names. It is like making a phone book. And if you can't do that, what always concerns me is that if you can't do that, what else are you screwing up? I really think this is one of those things that is the canary in the coal mine for so many other issues. If you can't produce a list of people that you're contracted with and what their are. I would just emphasize, I think this is not a personal failing. If you are dealing with this, you are doing the best that you can in a situation that is really stacked against you. I think sharing your stories and underscoring that this is just something everyone is dealing with is one of the first steps to change. academic work that I did 6 years ago, which was largely based on people being generous enough to share their stories with me, has now led to a couple of lawsuits and some pushes to introduce some better legislation. And so I think that if we feel like they're really impact to letting people know what you're going through, and that if they're going through this thing, that they're not alone.
Thank you so much, Abigail. I appreciate all that you do in your space of advocacy, and I can hear your outrage, your anger, what motivates you, and that sort of leads me to another question as we're sort of rounding the corner of the last part of our evening together, and that is, there's a lot of anger out there, and there's a lot of calls for change, and you talk about injustice, you talk about criminality, you talk about people intentionally breaking the law, companies breaking the law, lives being lost. And I'd be derelict if I didn't acknowledge that there's even people in this country who've taken vigilante justice into their hands. Luigi Mangione, who, as we all know in New York and across the country, killed Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, shot him down in the streets. And people around the country applauded. Many people, not all people, but some people applauded that vigilantism, which sort of the worst, I would argue, aspect of what it means to be American, what it means to be human, to celebrate the murder of someone. But that anger is real, and the desire for change is real. So what's it going to take for the health insurance industry to change? You know we're doing really well when the guy operating the soundboard raises his hand.
Turning up my own mic here, that's fun. I just think we need to look to a future that isn't this. Something else. Community effort. If they're not going to stand up for us, we need to stand up for us together.
From our sound operators, microphone to your ears. Anybody else? Antoine, you're our best customers. I'm going to go behind you right there because there was someone with their hand up. I promise, yeah.
Hi, I'm David Lloyd, and I work for a mental health nonprofit, Inseparable, that works on public policy change across the country and on particularly insurance laws and access to care. And we really need to change the paradigm and switch it on its head. The heartbreaking story of Ravi having the entire burden put on him and his family, and unable to navigate a system, is exactly the opposite of how it should be. And so we need to put the onus on insurance companies. If insurance companies, if we can't get them to do what needs to be done, we need to get them out of the picture. And ultimately, we need to put in place, strong laws and enforce strong laws, as Abigail pointed out. There's really no accountability right now across the country. The laws are violated. It's simply made to be a cost of doing business, as Wendell pointed out. And we have to make sure that there's real enforcement, that the laws are changed, and ultimately that we make it so that we put people first and are reimbursing and paying for things like clubhouses that Fountain House does, and changing the system so that people can access care and that we're not allowing what are for-profit businesses to put their financial interest between patients, between individuals and the care they need.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. So it sounds like a movement at the grassroots level. It sounds like policy and laws at the highest level. It's really powerful to hear from people who work inside and outside the system, speaking so authentically about what they think needs to be done because they know, because they've been part of it. Does anyone else have a thought? There's a hand over here of what it's going to take for this to change.
Well, what resonated for me, I didn't know the story, but I knew how it was going to end. And the simple fact that people have to spend so much of their time in their life trying to get what they're paying for. Like, he spent hours and hours and hours on the phone, as I'm sure everybody in this room has, to try and get what he's paid for. And the non-responsiveness, and then his mother doing the same thing. It's infuriating. And, Medicare for all is the answer. We all know that. And what everybody said about how there's lobbying and, you know, contributing to our Congress people. It just has to be from the people up, just like we did on Saturday. And it has to be continued over and over and over again.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there's a hand right in front of you, making it even easier for Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all have to look at what we're really doing here. You know, when I come to Theater of War because we come to a room, all of us, and we join together to be in a conversation with one another, to really connect with one another. We use social media, we use cameras and microphones to connect, to actually try and touch upon and express the truth. What we're up to in delivering healthcare, and I'm a registered nurse, is to make money. It's big business. It's not a right, it's a business. And as long as it's a business, we're gonna rip people off. And people say, well, we have to, you know, enforce the law. Well, look, we have a system where people at the highest levels of our government are ignoring the law. We've undermined the law. So fundamentally what we need is we need as a human species to wake up. We need to wake up and begin. I was at the march, 100,000 people apparently, down Fifth Avenue, old women with a walker, a baby in a stroller, crowds of people, not one moment of cruelty, rudeness, everything was warmth, support. Spontaneously at intersections, the group of us stopping to let cars go through. We were operating as a human system. We were communicating the truth we were awake. We knew what we were doing here. Just as in Theater of War, we know what we're doing. We are coming to have a conversation that matters. And we've got to start doing that. And you know, taking this to Washington, I mean, you know, the people in Washington, you know, if what you're up to is to rip people off and make money, we don't give a shit about the truth. Excuse me.
It's okay.
But you know,
it's recorded, so it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's all.
Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate your passion. Thank you for what you said about Theater of War Productions and our work and how it connects to the work that you're trying to do. I like the idea that, and this is now going to be part of our clip reel, that the objective is to wake up. I kind of need 130 plus all the people who are out there in the world who are part of this conversation to wake myself up. I need your consciousness and your ideas to wake myself to this. I need Max's article. I need the actors' performances. I need to hear contradictory statements that I don't agree with to wake myself up. So I want to get to last couple people on Zoom, and then I want to get to a final question in the fleeting moments we have left with us. We have Jane, who is audio only, and we want to honor people who may want to come in as audio only. That's fine. We only have a few minutes left, Jane, but what spoke to you? What did you want to speak to tonight?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm a primary care physician, and I have a baby with me, so I'm sorry for staying off camera. And I'm also a health services researcher, and like Abigail Berman, I study ghost networks and I study mental health access, and a lot of that has been driven by my own personal experience trying to get my patients into specialty mental health care. And I've basically become a de facto mental health provider because I cannot get that for my patients. And in studying provider networks in particular, I just wanted to sort of blow this up, zoom out a little bit to complement what others have shared anecdotally. When we've studied these networks, we find that 60% or more of these provider networks are ghost networks, particularly in psychiatry. So 2/3 of the psychiatrists that you'll call on your networks directories are going to be ghost providers not taking care of patients when we look at the claims. And there's lots of reasons for that. Actually, it's quite complex, and there's both push and pull factors. There's factors on the insurer side that people have brought up, including design of narrow networks on purpose. but there's also provider level pull factors in terms of, choices not to participate in networks. And we know that about half of psychiatrists do not participate in insurance, and they actually prefer to take cash because there's a robust cash pay market. And there's huge reimbursement differentials. There's administrative burdens in participating in networks. There's differences in patient populations. I think sort of just adding a different perspective here that's more holistic, putting this all on the insurance company is a bit simplistic in some ways, because there's a lot of places where this Swiss cheese model that failed Ravi in this story cannot be sort of isolated to a single cause. And there's lots of places where all of us can turn inward and be part of the solution. It's not just the insurance companies that are at fault here, but there's lots of different holes that allowed Ravi to slip through and have the ultimate tragic but preventable outcome that he did.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for being with us. I'm just going to keep moving because I want to get to just a few more, but I really appreciate what you brought, the complexity you brought into the room, the points you just made. Kent, you've been waiting for some time. We only have a minute or so, but what resonated with you?
Okay, I just want to say, as a compliance officer for 30 years in insurance companies, mostly property casualty, but some life and health, I have been called into senior vice president's office and intentionally told to violate state laws. I mean, they intentionally do this, and more than one company. I finally resigned making $100,000 a year and took a job making $10.50 an hour in a hospital and found out insurance companies cheat us there too. They send nurses in to view patients' records and then tell doctors they have to discharge them. So the corruption in the insurance field is beyond anyone's imagination.
Thank you so much, Kent. Thank you for sharing your story and your sacrifice in terms of the choice you made to leave the insurance industry after waking up in the way that you described. Two left. Joan, if you've been waiting for some time, again, if you could be brief, we'd be grateful. Over to you. Joan, what resonated with you? Joan, you have to unmute yourself. There you are.
There we go. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay. I've had chronic depression since childhood, before it was known that kids could get depression, from two wonderful psychiatrists, McNew and Citrin. I went on medication. When I talked about it, people would say, oh, you'll be off it soon. I'm like, would you say that if I had diabetes? Well, no, it's a medical decision. Well, yeah. One of my therapists was told that she needed a note to see me. So she wrote me a note and said, I think that when somebody presents themselves to mental health care clinic, you should give them mental health care. But since you want a note, here it is, and you know exactly where you can put it. And I love that somebody in the mental health care system really understood that it was the system that broke and not the rest of us. There's a mental health parity law, which is not followed at all. It's the last thing that patients and providers have time for, but maybe there are law firms out there, or ProPublica, that could look more into this class action lawsuit, saying, hey, there's this law here. Flagrant violations, left, right, up, down. And so I think that's all I needed to say.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of that. Joan, I like your note. That's a really great thing. I'd like to, maybe we can all carry that note around with us and carry it with us. That if you need a note to know that someone asking for mental health care needs health care, then maybe it's you should be examined, not the person. Last on Zoom, before we go back to one or two more people very quickly in the audience here in New York City, is Ella. Ella, what did you want to speak to tonight?
Hi, I'm actually from Australia.
Are you in Australia?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us across the planet.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think it's a really great opportunity that you can widen this audience so far over Zoom. I feel really grateful to be a part of it. I just want to say, with everything going on in the world, politically, environmentally, all over, I feel that across all mediums, art has acted as a means of educating and communicating to people what is really going on, and even promoting change, which obviously is happening here as well, hopefully. This production is a prime example of such a timely and necessary conversation. I just want to say thank you for giving people the platform and to share their experiences and educate others. But I also want to ask, in such a sensitive and frankly dangerous time in political history, do you think there's any risk that these platforms can be taken away or restricted? And to kind of bounce off of the comment from your sound guy, do you think this community will have the freedom to go together and have these conversations and support others? If not, how will you navigate this?
That's a great question to drop in the audience when there's 30 seconds left in the conversation. And I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation, but it never gets old for me to go from New York to another part of the world, to Australia, and know that we're actually connected across space and time, and that we're not being obstructed or mediated by corporations or governments, that we're talking to each other just directly as if we're talking on the phone via Zoom. It's so powerful to be able to be in that kind of pluralistic, democratic discourse. So thank you for bringing that question into the room. I hope they don't take it away from us. But if they do, then that's when theater gets really interesting, when we start doing it in the basement, when the electricity goes off. And the stakes are all high, and we all don't have to worry because we know that every word counts. And I guess that's what Theater of War Productions is about too. Can we raise our consciousness in a room to acknowledge that every word of Max's article counts, and every word that was said in the room counted, and that the stakes are life and death. What happens next will determine what happens to the life of another person, maybe to our left or our right. Or whom we'll be passing on the way out of the studio, or on the streets, or in public transportation, or in our homes, or places of worship or work. My question is simply this: we've talked about a lot of really hard things tonight. We've confronted some really insidious and challenging, one might argue, evil things, and also some really complex problems. And we faced some really hard stories that people have shared. Is there hope in any of this? Oh man, make my job so easy.
Sorry, I'm feeling hopeful.
And you wear your Fountain House t-shirts.
And I'm wearing, right. We've talked a lot about Fountain House, which isn't, we got it down. But I think, if we look around, and I don't know any of you guys, except for maybe a couple in the back. But this is hope. I think this is really incredibly hopeful that we were strangers moments ago, and now we're all sitting together in a room hoping for a better society and trying to really execute that together. This room itself is a symbol of hope. So I hope we can walk away from tonight knowing that there's people from all walks of life, from all different experiences, that share this very human thing of just existing together. And that, I don't know, it just feels very lovely, especially during this time.
Thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge that we have Robbie's mother, Barbara, with us tonight, and she just raised her hand. So I'm going to bring the mic over to Barbara.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to submit that right now we are hearing a lot about waste, fraud, and abuse. And what I would submit, in the name of waste, fraud, and abuse, we have basically dismantled already our public health system, which was something of a counter to the for-profit system. But what I would submit is that waste, when you think of Ravi and all the people who've suffered, who have not been able to get health care, the abuse that's within the system, as you saw, and the fraud that's intentional within the system, because we're driven not to take care of people, but to pay our stakeholders. And that's who the industry is beholden to. So I think that it's a moment of hope, because waste, fraud, and abuse could give us a moment of clarity to look at what's going on right now and say, because waste, fraud, and abuse is baked into the structure of the current system we have. So until we can change that, and we can only do that from the grassroots up, it's certainly not going to be the people at the top. So those are my
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you. Is there a hand here? Okay. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing Robbie's story with us. Thank you to Max, the author, who's sitting next to Barbara as well. Yeah, so we're past the end of our time, and I can hear myself give him the hook, to myself. So I'm gonna, but I'm not gonna give you the hook. I just say no pressure to sum everything up into one perfect statement, but you'll have the last word of the conversation.
Thanks, Brian. I think the thing that resonated with me specifically about the is there hope, is that even though Ravi didn't make it through, there was lots of people who told Ravi to hold on and to keep going. And I think the thing that gives me hope about it is everybody here is talking about moving forward and finding your people and reaching your hand out. And it reminded me of your question about what's the solution. And I think the solution in some ways is that, well, healthcare can't be profitable anymore. That's the problem, is that people make so much money off of it because sickness sells. And so what reminded me to be hopeful through all of this is that people can always outlast a problem. And as long as people keep telling people to hold on and to keep finding things, or people have these incredible nonprofit organizations we kept hearing about, to keep people pushing forward and to keep people trying to outlast, because that's what I think is what we're going to have to do. That's what's hopeful for me, is everybody pushing everybody else forward.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful and fitting last word. We didn't come here to tie a bow on the conversation or put a period at the end of the sentence. We just came here to start it. It's been a really powerful and intimate exchange, exceeding all my wildest expectations. I want to thank the actors for their performances again tonight. I want to thank again Max Blau, the author, and Barbara Weber, Ravi's mom. And then just bear with me one sec. I want to thank ProPublica, Robin Sparkman, Almudena Toral, Alexis Stevens, WNYC, Emily Botine, Jason Saul, Ryan Wild, and the amazing team here at the Greene Space. Theater of War production staff, Marjolaine Goldsmith has been running the Zoom in the back of the room, Dominic DuPont and Adam Isco, and the Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund for their generous support. If we had one message to deliver to you, it's simply this: you're not alone in this room, as evidenced by this conversation we've started, but by no means finished. Not alone across the country and the world, as evidenced by our friends in Australia who joined us in dialogue tonight. Most critically, you're not alone across time. We're going to get there eventually. We just have to hold on. We have to last, and we have to push each other forward. That's what I got from the end, and that gives me hope. Thank you so much for that closing word. I want to thank all of you for being part of our experiment tonight with long-form journalism at the Greene Space. Tune in on April 26th at 2 p.m. and the 29th at 8 p.m. to hear a reflection, a distilled reflection of what happened in the room that hopefully will, with you, radiate out of the room into places we couldn't even imagine, and then over the airwaves and over Zoom, radiate out into places and touch people and push them forward and tell them to hold on and bring them together in ways we couldn't have anticipated had we not come together here tonight. Thank you all. It's been an absolute honor to be with you. Be well. Good night.